Great Lamrim that is in the special insight section of the Great Lamrim Temple, there's this quote that say that talk about the appearance of true existence, that the appearance of true existence, that this is the mistaken appearance because it is an object of elimination. So having described the mistaken appearance as an object of elimination, so therefore some would argue that conventional phenomena such as the bath and the mirror and so forth, they are not mistaken appearances. They are not mistaken appearances in the sense that they do not appear to a mistaken awareness, or that they are not mistaken appearances. Why? Because they are not objects of elimination. So some would argue that here when we talk about phenomena, conventional truth being merely mistaken appearances, that some would argue this refers most specifically to the appearance of true existence, because the appearance of true existence is an object of elimination. That is something to be abandoned or something to be eliminated, but it's not that other phenomena such as the vast, that they're objects of elimination. So it would not be correct to say that they are mistaken appearances. So this is what some would argue based on what it says in the Lamrim Temple when it talks about mistaken appearances being an object of elimination.
지난 진주나래 디요래 정면에 매나 아니 되게 가수그래 다 심지라 면에 매나 수위 타바도그래 수위치도 아니 되게 최송을 되게 뒤가 내용도 전에 몽베 따바가이 모스 몽베기 따바레스 심지니 어디게지 요래 다다가 단단다티나 신진을 전나 춘에 남대에 지레스 심진세디 디두고라 기시다 춘나 지시마 쟁이나 다 몽버시에디 마다마제바 대화나니다 아니 마슈바 대화나니다 마제비 차네 몽버스니 민다 마다마제비 셰바들라 마다마제비 셰비다바레스 인지시파 제주주르다.
So this is also something you find in Shantideva, Bodhisattva flag, where someone asks, well, if sentient beings do not exist from their own side, who is it that attains liberation? Who is it that teaches Dharma and so forth? So the response then is, those sentient beings, they are merely imputed by ignorance or by confusion. So here, what it means, how we would translate, or the words we would use in this context here, would be that sentient beings are that which is a mere mistaken appearance. So they appear as mistaken, sentient beings appear as mistaken. So when we talk about here confusion or ignorance, that refers to an awareness that has not investigated, that has not analyzed the suchness. So an awareness, a consciousness that has not investigated or analyzed suchness is here giving the name confusion. So phenomena therefore exist because they're imputed by confusion. They're imputed by this confused or ignorant mind, which is a mind that does not examine or analyze suchness.
디네마 농숨지기 와라 지지기 와라 자시 지칭이 지도 자시 지칭 어디나다 다 바게 로마와시 된다는 것을 지금이죠.
Then there's here there's a quote, there's a few quotes down the line. I think it's probably the quote in the last line of 681, which is from Leonard Sankapa's Ocean of Vision, which is a great commentary on Nagarjuna Skandana wisdom. So Vishala Sanji will just speak about the meaning of that quote.
Tadila ani phungboda khanda gejeeda tenjeda tinji kunjodi teni garcheres ko digidi mune marwas teni garchigo res 가르스나 문에 마힘바디 아니 방자레스라니 하기 뒤와지 거용디 엔디기 렌디다 아니 방자 이나야 아니 디 매비 토네 되는데 버디 또투 말레스 또투 말레스와 또투 말레 되는데 뭐마도나냐 타버토투 말레 디인자 아니 고행원에 디 추이나야 내가 딜레 추디 통역이 뇌제디 되는 이거가 나신 고행원에 리타하게 다 된담대바디레데 아니 디기 탑라 아니 군조디 아니 내가 남샤디 셰버레스
So here, there's a quote here found in The Ocean of Reasoning, where someone asked the question: if phenomena are, for example, the aggregates or dependent arising and so forth, if these phenomena are merely if these phenomena, so this is the quote on 182 here, so if phenomena such as the aggregate, elements, truths, dependent arising and so forth, so they are actually to be abandoned, they're objects to be eliminated. So if that is the case, so why do you need them basically? So they're actually objects to be abandoned. And the answer is that it's true that these mistaken conventional truths, that these phenomena are to be abandoned, but without depending on them, without depending on these conventional truths, one is unable to realize the ultimate truth. So without depending on conventional truth, which really exists conventionally, although they are to be eliminated, you're unable to realize the ultimate truth. So this is a little bit like here saying that in the same way we want to attain liberation, so we need to depend on conventional truth in order to understand the ultimate truth, and the ultimate truth needs to be realized in order to achieve liberation. So this is similar to a person who actually wants to understand ultimate truth. It's like a person looking for water. So that's the main kind of goal. But they use a vessel, they use something temporarily. They're not interested in the vessel itself, but they utilize the vessel in order to be able to get what they ultimately want, the water. So likewise here, we need to depend on the conventional truth, although it is an object of elimination, to get at the ultimate truth.
Kareslavaina, Tangeda, and Toto Magiluna Shinchini, Tishijao, and Tipesha, and to Tangulu Kiona. Toto Magi Tishija, the shit near Toto Magi. Kunzo di Panja into which is over, that the Naka resti, Kovadi.
So then, when we say that the conventional truths are objects of elimination, so talking about that, then we need to speak of it from the point of view of the ultimate. So saying, how are conventional truths objects of elimination? So this explanation is given in Lama Tsongkhapa's text called Arranging the Path of Pramana. And Dilla and the Karika Resena, any Karsuguri Tardugi, Topja, Randengi, Tardugi, Topjagi on the Chene, and Deus Lenjavta, Idimirus, Lamdentian, Tardugi on the Chena, Idiromares, Negapta Isichego Chiremato, Kares Ducala, Chiramada de Devilula, Tardudi, Dajunchevora, and they told him to Jatayunche, Lamdenti Junche Treasure. That tar any Godedi Mato, Shadayo Marta, Fodoshina, or D. Lendish Javier. So the response to that here is the explanation that is given here according to Lama Tsongkhapa's arranging the path of pramana. It's saying that when we realize phenomena such as impermanence, so we look at phenomena such as impermanence, suffering, empty, and so forth. So these are the tools. So what are the tools that enable us to realize these phenomena? What is it that enables us to get at those phenomena? Well, it is something impermanent itself, and that is something that is not reliable. So in other words, we're depending on something that is not something we cannot rely upon, something we cannot believe in because it's not reliable, it's an unreliable phenomenon. So because it is impermanent, but if that's the case, if something that is impermanent is not reliable, the only thing that is reliable is ultimate truth. So if something that is impermanent is not reliable, that would mean that the truth of the path is not reliable. It's something we cannot believe in. But on the other hand, we say the truth of the path is an object of refuge. It's something we take refuge in. We take refuge in the truth of the path. So the response to that is that from the ultimate point of view, or from the final point of view, then we do not rely on the truth of the path, but it's just temporarily that we rely on the truth of the path. So it's temporarily that we're going to depend on it, that from an ultimate point of view, it is not reliable. From an ultimate point of view, we cannot believe and we cannot have faith in something that's such as the truth of the path. So it's only from an ultimate point of view that we can rely, from an ultimate point of view, we cannot rely on the truth of the path or anything else that is permanent, but temporarily we can do so. So this explanation, that kind of view explains why, according to the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika school, they say that when a person attains nirvana, their continuum is cut, which means that the continuum, the aggregates of the person, do not continue on, which also means that the truth of the path that exists in their continuum, the continuum of that, their truth of the path stops existing. And so all the person is left with is the truth of cessation.
that densa divina lo magale lo ni sungi chela lo chenchire lo sen sumbe sorobuchi tini ko zu the dinang lo la atanda di chirama da tedebe tabata yondi da junchire pumu junchire skije lewa di ledi zane namsa wala di tawa de koya mindu sun tingda da junchire pumu junchire ache koya mindu malu kin koya mindu sun tingda.
So when we first study the topic of Harchin as a scope, or to translate it into English, Prajnaparamita, or the Perfectional Wisdom Sutra, when we first study the hidden meaning of the Perfectional Wisdom Sutra, we usually start with the topic we start doing at the beginning of the study of Harchin. It's the first year of Harchin, and usually 2 to 3 years into our studies, once we start studying philosophy or debate. So about 2 or 3 years after we started, there's a topic called Nirvana. We deal with what is Nirvana, and when we study that particular topic, what we learn is that according to the Vaibhashika, the Sautrantika school, the explanation is according to these lower tenet systems, the continuum of the person who becomes an arhat is cut, so that the psychophysical aggregates, they don't continue on existing. And the thought that arises when learning upon this, that this is not something I need. That kind of liberation I don't want, if that means that one's continuum is cut. So it is not just that from an ordinary as myself, Geshe-la is saying, who's thinking that, or who's thinking that. There are also some great scholars, such as Nagarjuna, who would argue that that actually doesn't make sense, that a person's continuum is cut upon their attainment of nirvana.
In the concept that you take the hotiga the government level chibare the kumje peti khagare konjegi ta da yunchena simjena kadis pendo jobores samda de ligoro ni da yunchena mal goya mindus di peti khagare.
but the reason for why these great scholars think there's no point, and me thinking there is no point, Geshe-la thinking there's no point, the reason is different. Why these great masters think there's no point that one's continuing, it's meaningless to attain a kind of nirvana such that one's continuous cup. Their kind of assertion is that then one is not able to benefit sentient beings. If one's psychophysical aggregates won't continue on, they won't be able to, this person will not be able to work for the benefit of others. In my case, it's just thinking, I don't need that. I don't need that kind of liberation. That is why I'm thinking this kind of liberation does not make sense. So in my case, thinking it's not okay, not wanting such nirvana or such liberation is because I'm attached to my aggregates. So I want them to continue. So, with respect to the self, with respect to the aggregate, well, they're in the nature of suffering. They're impermanent. They're in the nature of suffering. So when we say here, the aggregates are in the nature of suffering, but then if one debates and then one says the self is in the nature of suffering, it is impure. It's in the nature of suffering. Sometimes there's a sense of discomfort. Oh, the self is kind of impure. It doesn't really feel comfortable. But actually, in reality, we say that the self, the aggregates, all those are in the nature of suffering. They're impure, they're impermanent, they're in the nature of suffering. So, therefore, there's this attachment thus to the aggregates, to the self. So there's attachment to these impurities or this aggregate, the self, which are in the nature of suffering. So therefore, there's this comfort on hearing that the self and the aggregates are
동시에 벌자서 이 저버듯이 동네의 신고를 송출이 양양 송고도 앞에 내절로서 주인이 용시장 이 유지기라 신기디 하게 이 가수를 나서나 신인 거지 풍부디 모처거래 송대해들이 지산다 디게디 중심만 안에 무슨 비열에 정말 무시 무슨 인자 지지는 도나 테스팅이 유시기래 단뒤에다 도나 테지디 사직이 초와 대화디 동네기랑 신레스 다도 또 저샤모도 오늘 챙기면서 생각도 이 맞은 인상 안 대화디라 하게 된더니 레디기도 해.
So as Holiness the Dalai Lama, when describing the phrase suffering should be known, so when describing the sentence, the statement suffering should be known, His Holiness very clearly says that here the type of suffering that should be known is the pervasive conditioned suffering. So he's basing that on the explanation of Benjamin Zoltjigian, who says that the aggregate should be seen like a disease. So the aggregate being pervasive conditioned suffering, they're like a disease. For those of you, many of you have noticed that, you may have seen this in the scriptures being explained, you may have heard this explanation, so you may have noticed this, or you may be aware of that kind of explanation. But when it comes to the pleasant feeling, the kind of ordinary, the kind of pleasant feeling we have, there's not really a sense that that is in the nature of suffering. There's not really a sense that this is something non-desirable in the sense that we wish to have that kind of ordinary feeling of suffering.
지난해 만수기 가서 남중기 루스노로라 아니 민정님과 제바이나 메레당나 강에 유에버디 문진체험하도 때라당나 디치라 강에 가리 용그래 디 지도 제노처를 있다 등에 용나 디 두샤레스 디 문진체험하도 디기 용나 디기 깨진이야 강에 신다 꽤 가리어래 디 지도 제노처네 같이 지대는다 지대가 원도 집이 야가 됐을라 타지도 야보라마도 딜을 꽤 담아 총해. 봐. 시민들이 수신도 지고 같이 나오면도 같이 깨닫고 저게 좀 있어 지다도.
So actually, from the point of view of the world, like the worldly kind of perception, well, if someone criticizes us, when someone abuses us, that is seen as something negative. That is seen as something problematic. Whereas if someone praises us, we don't actually understand the problems that arise from that. We don't see that as problematic. We see that as 100% good. So we never see this as problematic. And then with regard to something negative, if something some suffering arises, for example, we see that as 100% negative, and that is really negative. Whereas something positive, if a happiness, a happy situation arises, we never think what kind of problems come along with that happy situation. That a happy state also has its disadvantages. We never think of that. So this is the worldly kind of assertion that whatever is there's a kind of happiness, it's 100% something positive, 100% something good.
不可以去看世界人说好的这些事情到底有多不好，就是不可以看到的缺点。老师刚刚提到说，就像我们要把它当成是如理一指的上师，就不可以看上师的缺点一样，我们不可以看这个世间的所谓的好到底有多坏，不可以去看这些面向。
那第二的我们说苦力有个经验的嘛，我们现在什么当考过习不得嘛是吧？但其实什么当不赢呢？아니 스스로 무의만 보여나 아니 무의매나 강에 디어랬다 나 강에 민도스 기부체 야 무의매나 무의나 무의에 가실랬다 고마이니 고고도 잡아기니 고고도 아니 신다 파샤니 스스로도 스스부도 제 파랍라다네 고소한테고 땅고도 남다 제고도 와다 가트네 기샤 수치기 되지메 어디내지는 디초네 삼당만 다 강무의매 기샤를 대여로야 다 같이 샘디 그뒤에 지고 용해지 제도 라포드부터에 상당 가고 말이는 것을 고려하기 되지야로.
So this is something, it's due to the environment we live in, the condition of the environment that we have self-thought, but it's actually not difficult to think along these lines. It's not difficult to actually become aware of the fact that, well, usually we think if one has a lot of money, well, that is good because then one doesn't have problems. It's a problem not having money. So therefore there's a sense of, if I have lots of money, then I will free. But one doesn't think of the negative side that someone who has a lot of money, then there's a worry of a robber or a thief kind of taking away the money. That one has children, for example, we need to hire a bodyguard because otherwise the children are unable to go to school without endangering their life. So when it's bodyguards and so forth, so one doesn't really think of these problems, but in actuality, it is not that difficult to become aware that there are these problems with having a lot of money. So therefore, having no money, I could say, well, I have no money, I'm always happy. I'm always happy. So there is a way, even though it's very coarse, but there's a way in which one can see the positive in not having a lot of money, in not having such wealth and so forth. And it's not that difficult to actually think along those lines, seeing the positive in such a situation.
That is Kavadi. Any Tinti Samno Tanginjile, career resena, Penta Miyabuchi in a Suzu Tomo. In a Tobodi, Tobo to Jajuna, Konyam the Tewaji, Shandanim the Tewacha, Yakaniji Tiamora. Ready, Kuranda Yabushu, Tingido, Sema, Tiso Devuchi, Pagi Choa Tewagi, Risujuma Kanji, Unsul Digite, Digi Kenchini, and Shandat in the coming Yondo Yungo Dude in a Kurayabura, Sledi, Chashin Pichin Letuga. The Kurang told to me, but the Moma Chena, so the Kurang to me, the stage Majuna. And call it in the Shana Yungo de Lane, Reda in a Kurayabura City, Silkini, Kaji, Dignity, down to Yoma.
A more difficult situation, what is more difficult is to think along the lines that if one has a friend, for example, one thinks that this friend is really something good, someone who gives me happiness. Actually, if there's an enemy, that one has an enemy, someone who dislikes that friend, they see something negative in that person. But I'm unable to see this. There's a deep sense that, no, this person doesn't have any faults, this person is someone good, they're really something positive, so they give me happiness and so forth. So it's very difficult to let go of that sense that this person is really good, this is really someone who benefits me. Although one would think that another person is
界的话，我们也都说，
cannot be found. So
因为这个有漏的顺带带来的那些结果是不好的结果，但有漏的本身是好的。就是当我们再怎么样说，这个乐受呢，它有怎么样的缺点，然后会有什么过患的时候，你的嘴里会想的是什么呢？虽然是这样，但是它本身是好的。如果在这样状况之下，你根本不可能有那个能力呢去舍掉这些乐受。
那三了当然现在用过来的，不我们到处头呢，三了当然点点电话的，我让你电话的全部太这么多，可能我们的电话里面都写进，到外国也会有呢，就偏色了，这样了。
So then there's other different ways of thinking, but if one takes it to think along the lines of the Madhyamika, the view of Madhyamika, then well, this kind of happiness, that kind of happiness, it doesn't exist in reality, it doesn't exist from its own side. It is a happiness that I experience, but that's all there is, so there is no true, there's no actual reality with regard to that. It doesn't exist for where it comes inside.
타바당 산지고반 중에 뒤에다 배차 창마 방고디 디게디 미타바도 동료와다 대상당으로 다 된지 되는 만인이지나 아니 수시 대화디 수수 고해 다 차세기 대화디 수수 라투에 되다 라투에 두나 안 미타바 동안 대모고체 라투에 민이지를 생된다 강해로 하다 우인의 수수수 라투에 민이지라 배차게 되나 강해인데 아니 라투에 민도나 미타바를 두고 하다 저도 지금
So those that attain liberation and enlightenment, well, they have to let go of their attachment. So, but in order to let go of their attachment, they have to think of impermanence, of the suffering nature. They have to depend on these kind of characteristics, on these phenomena in order to reach that state. So, but then those who attain happiness, who feel happy, they may not be able to think about the suffering nature of their unhappiness, their impermanence, and so forth. So if you don't gain any happiness, then maybe you can think about it. If you don't actually experience any happiness, maybe then you can think about the impermanence of the suffering nature of that happiness. If you don't get it. So as long as you have it, it's not active, then it's able to think about these characteristics. But when you don't have it, then maybe you're reflecting upon those characteristics.
제선 디가라 타바 담나 다진 책이 돼서 놀라 마테오실레 디네 베제 아스타제 아니 저거도지 동에 담냠용 마케네 고아디 차용디 다양 부모지마체나 단뒤에 부모지레나 양주 개와지레네 개와레나 양시도래 제선 다 부모지마체나 양주 동에랑 레도아스 타바레기면 도스냐 벌써 다다런데요.
So whatever it is, people are saying that going back to liberation here, so this idea that one doesn't feel comfortable saying that when one attains to liberation or nirvana, that one's continuous, the mental and physical continue being cut. Well, then later on when you talk about the pervasive condition suffering, so not necessarily from the point of view of personal practice or experience on daily meditation, but just how we have understanding about way of gaining intellectual understanding or studying about the awful condition of suffering. When one thinks that after attaining nirvana, the aggregates continue on, if one takes that to mind, so instead of continuing the aggregates being cut, if they were to continue on, that would mean they would have to die one day, so that there would be death. So if the continuum of the aggregates persists, then that would mean there would be death again, and then that again doesn't feel okay, because you're again in that same situation of taking on aggregates, dying again, taking on aggregates and dying again. So then one holds the opposite view, that it doesn't seem comfortable, it doesn't seem right that the aggregates continue actually even after attaining nirvana.
디카도르다 다 탄주웨기 단양대 드시자 방식으로 타버 드시자다. 디 교용도 신의 부모주마 체바의 인생이 이네 부모주마 체나 타버리면 도와 세기 천왕디에 가통이 인지치 용되게 되시.
So in this context here in the Prajnanika school, one finds an explanation that is such that upon attaining nirvana, attaining liberation, that the idea that the aggregates are not eliminated, so without the continuum of the aggregates being eliminated, so without explaining that, but at the same time being able to eliminate or being able to stop the sense that this is not okay, that they continue. So therefore in the Prajnatika school one finds a way in which one can explain the continuation of the aggregates, but at the same time it is possible to overcome the sense that this is not okay that the aggregates continue for the reason that was given before, because of the unique explanation of the Prajnatika.
디게제 시험도 있잖아요. 다 가리게제 레고르스나 아니 탄주에 게제 시에서 있잖아요. 아니 타바데 고텐디 던데 말에 스케치 디간다 레고. 다 녀를 디답션에 디기도. 다기 미타바 인자 이데미로 아레스 라브라. 이데미로 이나 남데디 이데미로 아레스 타르도 원도 지니 아니 이데미로 아레스 남데 어디 다기 게제 시에디 디르와. 다 뒤에 탐지 류치스 남기 뒤로 뒤에 탐지 미다바 인자 류치스 루아스는 고걸당을 더러워 고걸당을 더러 인도 이지지요 말레스키 제요 말레스 뒤로 다 단다 탐지 유가로 군소 탐지 류치로 루아디 군소지 루아디 된다바스네디 쳔바 군소 탐지 쳔바 루아 지바르와 된다바 루아 지바르와 진짜 군소 탐지 류치이나 되게 뒤집어지 양진 다 남대다 뒤에 아니 군소 대바르와 류치르기도 와스 계제들이 뭐라 딜레티 전에다 아니 밀루와다 타두기다 밀루와다 칼라우다 밀루와다 취기 인수 아니 군소비 다 취인문도 교령도 나오라다 취인문도 교령도 디월 군소비 나와 탐지 가줘야지
The explanation that is given in the Prajnatika school is that of liberation, or more precisely, the truth of cessation here is an ultimate truth. So according to the Prajnatika school, the truth of cessation is explained to be an ultimate truth. And as we discussed a little earlier, before, that impermanent phenomena are said to be non-reliable, something we cannot believe in, we cannot trust in, we cannot depend upon. So that would also mean that the truth of the path is therefore something that we cannot trust, it's not trustworthy, we cannot rely on it. In general, there's also an explanation one finds in certain texts where impermanent phenomena, conditioned phenomena, or impermanent phenomena are explained to be deceptive. So there's this kind of description of impermanent phenomena being deceptive. But in particular, in the Prajnatika school, we talk about conventional truth. Conventional truth being deceptive. Deceptive as in like one cannot trust them. Deceptive as in like false. So therefore, the truth of the path is a conventional truth, which means we have to accept it to be deceptive. So what is something? What is a phenomenon that is non-deceptive? So we need to find some non-deceptiveness here. So eventually, or at the very end, when manifesting this sphere should be like Dhammadhatu, so the sphere of emptiness, when manifesting the sphere of emptiness from the perspective of that, all conventional truth cease to exist. So from the perspective of the manifestation of Dhammadhatu, or the sphere of emptiness, from that perspective, all conventional truth cease to be.
灭地是胜灭地。
제산타 주도와마기 타르도기 타르바디 따바지샤나 아니 밀루와 차르마도 미타바지샤나 류주레스 타르도기 이제 제스리와레스 나바나신 다다다 탄주율라 타르도기 타르바디 담다데바지 마샤나 군주데바지 샤와이나 딜류주로다 어디 저다 지고 얘기도.
So in the same way as the lower tenet system, they have to say that liberation in nirvana, that liberation is non-deceptive, in other words, permanent, so permanent, and therefore non-deceptive, because if it was impermanent, if liberation were to be permanent, then it would have to be deceptive or false. So likewise here in the Prasangika school, the truth of cessation is described to be an ultimate truth, because if it is an ultimate truth, it is non-deceptive, and it would not be correct to say that it's deceptive.
Tarbasi di tunda de shamores kijetile ta ine koten da tarba tunda de shamores di ta di chuni de bes la du zane ta chuni re la ni mare la ni ta keba tam mo bu yon de bor chuni toni la nature.
So when we speak about the truth of cessation here, so when we talk about the truth of cessation being an ultimate truth, we're saying that, but then the question that arises, is the truth of cessation suchness or not? In our Czech Geshe can I also use the word emptiness, and Geshe says, yeah, so whether you say emptiness or suchness, is the truth of cessation, though it is an ultimate truth, is it suchness or emptiness?
Jizanta koden tunda demba je toni mare la ni la rini user koden chuni re toni re la ngi la ngi orwa ta mashi dile rini da yugul de tinje la ngi khaba chimba de zugi la sung de gore di sung de gi korang gi tse sam dang sa khoa ji dile jowa ji no ne jora jowa di manyong ni ani koden toni mare la ngi ji ta tari ngai gi ta go mi da ta na hin chi ya di jowa chasang yong wi che la ani riba 하장기다 시럽살로 내려 차시 차신 차와 맞제버 체니 아니 거기에는 돈이 말이 되는 말이 나외지 이메로 삼정되래.
So with regard to here, now the truth of cessation being an ultimate truth and being emptiness. So with regard to being emptiness, well, there's some who say it's not emptiness, and then there's some that say it is emptiness. So there are different views here. One is, of course, a kind of view that is based on not an exact understanding for saying so. So saying that it is emptiness. So the view. So there's some that say it's not emptiness, but with regard to those who say it is emptiness, then there is a view which is very coarse, in the same way as I said earlier, thought it doesn't make sense that it contains liberation, that the aggregates are cut, that kind of view, like not really understanding the reason why. But there's another way in which a person accepts that it is suchness or emptiness, but by using very subtle kind of wisdom, by applying very subtle wisdom, going very deeply onto a certain level, that there's a person therefore coming to the conclusion that the truth of cessation is emptiness. So there's these two kind of reasons for holding this view. One is very superficial, and one reason is dependent on or in reliance on very deep reason. So now, first, in order to gain a better understanding here, whether the truth of cessation is suchness or not, so suchness and emptiness being the same, so whether it's suchness or not, everyone agrees that it is in the nature of suchness. So everyone would say, whether they agree on whether it is suchness or not, everyone would say, commonly accept that it is in the nature of suchness.
This is Negi ma thongba tindi yunan sungruchi. Negi tanda thongdebe nanglola toni koden toni isini pechi jie meba chawre. 남들랑 밀라고 직당 돈이다 말. 남들랑 이 돈이 디 고대인 세도 고대 돈이 인신이 지에면 저거래. 다 유여바디 아니 뒤로 대코나니 인세디 세우 유여바 저거래. 대코나니 인스. 나도 대코나니 인스라도 다가랑 레스 때문에 들어와. 다가랑 레 남나 전동 대바스 고한 집어 차기도 와. 대코나니 인스라도 대가 다 किसी लूं दिखे दिखें तर खेले ना देखो ना नहीं इम्बा खेले मोमेंट है खेले ना ता देखो ना नहीं कोई तो तो बात चिपचे इन्हें तो नहीं इनसे ना क्यों नहीं मैं बताऊँ ता चुई से दिल चिक दूसरा पेना ता दिल चुनी इन्हें हमें ना उन विषय जो सिंगी चुनी न्यादेसु चाहिए न्यादे इन की जगह में बचे न्यादेसु चाहिए लाडू चाहिए से चिक दूर माता न्यादे शे चाहिए 시 차이 나와이나 딜라 냥데 인신의 고와 랭초고래 딜라 냥데신 따바레스 냥데신 라바레스 디에 고와 랭초고 간들이야 냥데시에디 제만다 지위 춘이 디강라 디강네 디톤에 기지시에지 마도 딜리 로스 기지시에디 메바디 니가 기치거래
So I don't know whether there's other kind of scripture quotes that I haven't seen. So if I haven't seen it, please let me know. But from what I have seen so far, I've never really seen that that the truth of cessation is described as being emptiness. So that word I haven't seen being used. That, for example, during the path of release, the kind of the truth of cessation that is attained during the path of release, that truth of cessation being described as emptiness, I have not come across such a scriptural quotation. However, I've heard it described as being thatness or vastness, and it's very difficult for me to translate this word. Shuni, I've explained the word as meaning suchness. So thatness or vastness, the kunani, just that. So the kunani is that, so thatness. So I've heard it being described as thatness. So thatness, T-H-A-T-N-E-S-S, thatness. So that is an ultimate truth. This really refers to thatness in the sense of being an ultimate truth. So not that this is actually, not that this truth of cessation is described as emptiness, but rather as thatness. Likewise, and then Geshe-la gave a quote here saying that here the sphere of emptiness, so the sphere of emptiness of the mind, or the Dharma Dhatu of the mind, it is called nirvana. So this quote here can be interpreted in two ways. Here it's saying the emptiness or the Dharma Dhatu, or the suchness, the emptiness or the Dharma Dhatu of the mind is nirvana, or it is called that. It could also mean it is just imputed as being such, it is just designated as such, but it is not actual nirvana. So therefore, I haven't really heard, but what everyone agrees upon with regard to here, emptiness, so with regard to the truth of cessation here, that is thatness. And when we speak of nirvana refers to, nirvana needs to be described, needs to be explained from the point of view of, or in relation to the emptiness that is free from any kind of stain. So nirvana needs to be explained, needs to be set forth by way of, or through the selflessness, or dependent on the selflessness that is free from any kind of stain. By way of the suchness that is free from any kind of stain. That idea everyone agrees upon. So Geshe-la asked again. So Geshe-la checked with Vijayana, to ask again, have you seen any kind of reference saying that the truth of cessation is actual emptiness, and the Gemma said, no, I've seen the word suchness being used. And so Gemma said, yes, so being in the nature of suchness, but not actually emptiness. So definitely the word thatness. So those who know Tibetan, the word chuni, the word chuni is used for the truth of cessation, so we just translate as suchness. And then, of course, the word thatness, the kunani, that is also, so it's also described as emptiness, as the truth of cessation being that. So oftentimes there's this description of it is called such, so suchness is called such, being like a little bit less precise about it. It's like designated as being suchness. Those kind of phrases are used a lot.
Tadijidu judo magi nyamde lehedi ani ta pena tenzin sevi tobji ro mo sevi tobji ani mahomba na tekiwa meneba tiro ta mahomba de kiebe ba mahomba to menyo heme ba chaba yana menani ani tamenya de ina pumbu de juncheba diladu ani tanjuwe ta na pumbu juncheba de shiba se de chiba chagi melo mahomba de mejeba se de mahomba de chiba cha 대바 시거든 대바 집어를 받아 뭐 진체벌도 대바 세야 되지 시거체 아니 양교계 매바 기지 시버이나 마음버스에 차 디지 디니디 뭐보이스 기지 시험으로 시범 뭐 기지 시디 직제나 다다디 고대도다 된 것이야 되다 저도 매시 가서 시범 뭐 시에 들어지 매로 삼으시도 딘디기시 저도 유나
Now, with regard to the lower schools, when they describe nirvana, when they talk about nirvana, they describe, they talk about no future rebirth through the power of having extinguished the grasping onto the self, having extinguished affliction. So it's through the power of this extinguishment, that elimination of affliction and self-grasping, that one does not take rebirth again in the future. So then, from the point of view of nirvana without remainder, then they take of the continuum of the body and mind being cut, the continuum of that person being cut. So when we speak of the Prasangika school, the continuum being cut, that is the degeneratedness of the aggregate, which is described to be impermanent. The degeneratedness of something, the stopping of something that existed before, that degeneratedness is described to be impermanent. So when we speak of past and future, past here is the degeneratedness. So the past of something, the past of the aggregate is that degeneratedness, that stopping of the aggregates, which is seen, that degeneratedness, which is described as being impermanent. And then when we talk about the future, not taking future lifetimes. So the future here referring to not taking future lifetimes. Again, in both cases, we talk about those as being impermanent. Therefore, Geshe-la is saying that there must be a connection between the fact that the truth of cessation is an ultimate truth and the fact that the degeneratedness of a phenomenon is impermanent or a functioning thing. So Geshe-la repeated that there's a connection, Geshe-la thinks, that between the fact that the degeneratedness or the stopping of the phenomenon, that stops the situation, that degeneratedness being a functioning thing as accepted by the Prasangika, and the fact that the truth of cessation or the truth of cessation or nirvana is an ultimate truth.
초진의 단다디다 단단한 신진 저와이나 주도하면 시시에 양대디 미다바 자주로 모부차디 미다바 차나 이데미로 마치차 이시 디데마 힘병원도 따나야 주도하면 시시에 아니 가르스고레 칼로 타바디 군주디 전화디 단주에 따나디 군주데마 자주고도 단다기 단단히 군주데바 이나 야 류시지 자주로 디디차네 디기미 두스 시에바이나 다 단주에게네 다 타바디 디시도 와지 자고라다.
So
所以今天如果我们要
taking
下过
these
中
kind
的
of
主
views
张的
into
时候，自然的
consideration,
说法，
looking
这种
at
涅
the
槃的主张是不行
lower
的话呢
system,
那可
so
能
the
提
way
出来的
they
理由有
explain
两个，第
liberation
一个是
here,
就是
for
下过
the
中
lower
所说的这
system,
样
the
的
way
涅
they
槃，它是
describe
属于
nirvana, that
它是
actually
属于
has to
无
be
常的。
something
那既然
impermanent.
是属于无
And
常
if
法，
it
就
is
会变成我
impermanent,
刚才
well,
讲
that
到
would
的
mean
不可
it
保
is
定的
not
之法。
reliable, it's
这
not
第一个理由。
trustworthy.
第二个理由是，
Likewise,
如果根
according
据
to
下
the
过
lower
中的这
system,
种主张来
the
说
way
呢，
they
解脱
describe
就变成一种
liberation,
世
the way
俗
they
谛。
describe
那既然它是一个世俗谛
nirvana
的
or
话呢，它就是
liberation,
无体，
it
它
would
就
have
不
to be
是
a
成为
conventional
无体
truth,
狂。
a
因为我刚才
conventional
前面有
truth,
讲
so
到
again
说，
something that is
就印象派的
specific,
观点来说呢，
which
世
is
俗谛
why,
的法它其实是气狂法。
which is
那
why
如果
according to
今
the
天呢，
Kahika
是
school,
透过这
they
两个理由
describe
来说，
liberation as
下过
being
中所
ultimate
主张的
truth,
这个
something
涅
that
槃
is
是不
non-deceptive.
行的主张的话呢，那么印象派势必要提出一个他自己对于所谓的涅槃是什么的主张。
这第几律者呢？第这些教堂的，两代的多呢，制度抵挡的过去到达这个呢，上代去。
那关于这个部分的解释呢，在涅槃经
According
里
to
面有
this
一段文，
explanation, there is
至
also
于
a
涅槃经里面所
citation that
提
is
出的这一段
that
文
seems
是
to
不是能
support
够
this
提供给我们
explanation
这
from
个
the
更好
Nirvana
的这个理
Sutra.
解呢？
Whether
那我们
that
就要
is
再想
actually
想看。
okay or not needs to be seen, whether it really explains this truth.
在中间被到我曾经记得中间的你不然了，就我几年前的电视剧。
So here this is in the section where the followers of the
数
Sankhya
论派
school
的这个
discuss or
学
debate
者
the Buddha
他们
as
跟
Buddha
佛之间的所提出来的一段辩论。
with the Buddha.
中间给这位具体大波差点是吧？大波对了对呢，他这个没大波的给这些是吧？那中间的前两个就没大波了对呢，没大波光波了说别的，冷天对了对呢，那这个他把大波去套来个多少？是不得小是来。你就大波的这个没大波的用过来老的，前两个就没大波的对呢，这个大波用过来是这个的小是跟着修。